2-minute speech and then an introduction. We decided that with consultation with the Hamden Chamber, we'd have a more kind of a free-flowing debate and a discussion of these issues that face our state. So hopefully you'll hear interchange between the candidates. Some people may disagree, some people may agree on what these issues are and how they choose to fix it. And in the end, you, the people, will benefit by having their knowledge in this discussion. So without any further. So it's January 2011. You've just taken the oath of office. Moody's and Standard & Poor's have both downgraded the state's bond rating in December, so the state can expect to pay higher interest rates than the past. Debt service on the economic recovery notes issued to cover the state's fiscal year 2000 deficit will start in July, diverting $220 million a year in tax revenues to pay off the note in 5 years. Debt service on the securitization of anticipated revenues, $1.3 billion in bonds issued last summer to close the gap between spending and revenue will require payments of $180 million annually from revenues over the next 10 years. The Transportation Fund is anticipated to be in a deficit. The funds to support biomedical research have been rated. No tax credits or investments have been made to support startups or innovation. Support for public higher education has been flat for 3 years. The rainy day funds for UConn and the Connecticut State University system have been partially swept to support a 1-year fix for the general fund.
Pretty dismal.
The rainy day fund has been spent, and the federal stimulus funding has gone away, but the programs they fund, from corrections to Medicaid, to higher education, to elementary and secondary education, go on. And the state employees' collective bargaining units say they've given it the office. So all of this means that when you take office, one of you, the state will face a deficit of $3.8 billion in the fiscal year, which begins in July 2011. The next 2 years don't look that good either. Your budget must be presented to the General Assembly in 6 weeks. So what mix of spending cuts and increased taxes, beginning in mid-2011, would you propose? And it's interesting to note that recently Arthur Wright at UConn, in his spring Connecticut Economy magazine, wrote an article entitled "Exit Belt Tightening, Enter Soul Searching." He said that posing such questions could help thin the herd of hopefuls to succeed Jody Rell as state chief executive in January 2011. So most of you have already said that you cut between $1 billion and $500 million. So who wants to take the first whack at where we go?
I'll jump in.
Oz?
Sure. I was about to say, after all that, I hope there's something in here more than water. Just briefly, and I know we're trying to be responsive, let everybody have a chance at this. There's no question that we have to reduce spending in the state. And I don't think any one of us have a specific answer, other than we know we have to reduce the total amount, for example, of state employees. We've got to consolidate entities. But I want to just flip this question back a little bit, because we always jump into this on the spending side. I think it's important that we stay focused on what I would refer to as the revenue side in terms of job creation. We've lost roughly 90 to 100,000 jobs in the state, and when you look at the amount of tax revenue that comes when people are working, that still has to be a priority for the government. Yes, we've got to look at the spending, we've got to reduce the spending before we do anything on tax discussions. But I think the important role here for the governor, and this is something I've said over and over again, has got to be the Chief Economic Development Officer for the state. Because all we're going to do is focus on the spending and not focus on the jobs that are here today, make sure we're recruiting the companies that are here today and others. We are going to remain only in a spending cutting situation, which I think is not going to be to keep the state at the level that we want for all of us.
I think you did a great job, Tom, of explaining the crisis that Connecticut is facing, and I'm glad to see we all didn't get up and leave, because it's a tremendous challenge that we're facing as a state. I believe that the governor's role is to set a vision and to provide opportunities for the state of Connecticut. So it's going to be a sacrifice that we're all going to need to make on all fronts. But I think first, it's a both short-term expenditure and revenue problem and a long-term problem. because we need to decide how we're going to invest in some of the things that will move our state forward, addressing the education gap, addressing the transportation problem in our state, not having a high-speed rail between New York and Boston that would tremendously change the way Connecticut is viewed. So I see an expenditure issue first, where the governor needs to set bold and creative ways to reform our government. We've had the same form of government for 20 years. We should look at the expenditure side, but there's also money on the revenue side. If you look at our tax credits, we give away about $5 billion in tax credits, and we haven't really analyzed whether any of those are going towards investment in startups. So I do believe a combination of reassessing how we're spending the $18 billion needs to happen first, and I'd be prepared to do that.
I think Mike had a question, but again, it gets back to the question. You have a budget to do in 6 weeks. And so it's an interesting answer that it's a long-term problem, and it is, but you have to present a budget, and you have to put down line items of what we're going to do. And so that's what we're trying to understand. Where are we going to go? Mike.
Thanks, Tom. The next governor of the state, as was outlined, has to have the courage to do the difficult things, the courage to look at the spending side of this, and to look at what is going to be happening. And you're absolutely right. In 6 weeks, this next governor has to know where those cuts are going to be made, where the consolidations in government need to be made, where the efficiency needs to be made, and what jobs need to be consolidated and eliminated. As lieutenant governor, we have worked on plans and submitted plans to the legislature to do some of this. Unfortunately, because of the numbers in the General Assembly, we've not been able to get it through. We've put forward plans, legislation changes to consolidate departments, to get efficiencies. We're still providing the service, but we're not providing the service with much more administration. We're making sure those dollars pay. Those numbers do not, those bills don't pass because we don't have the numbers. So it's very important for the next governor also of their like party to make sure that they have the legislative support behind them to get these things done. Oz brings up a very good point. This is just not all about cutting, consolidations, efficiencies, where do we spend our dollars? It's about creating jobs. We have 100,000 people that are currently out of work in this state. Those are what I call today's jobs. Government's job and this governor's job is to create jobs in the state, to get those 100,000 people out of the poverty that aren't working back to work in the state. But the governor must also have the foresight to look at what the future jobs are. A statistic that I will throw out there, in 2009, the top 10 jobs, 6 of them did not exist in 2005. So our role in government, or as governor, is not only how do we get these folks back to work, by getting companies to expand and come to Connecticut, by getting our small businesses excited about some of the things we can do to them, to help them with their credit, help them with their job creation. But our job is also to work with our higher education, to work with our schools in the area of STEM, to say, what are the jobs of the future, and where do we invest in those?